Meet Erica. With a forced smile, she says goodbye to her peers and CEO as they walk out of their quarterly budget meeting. Feeling defeated, she walks to her office with her head down, thinking, why do I get so nervous? How do I get them to see what I see? How do I fix this? Erica is VP of Human Resources at a manufacturing company in Maryland. She spent weeks preparing for this meeting, gathering data to prove the need for more training and a focus on employee well-being to boost performance and reduce attrition. Sitting in her office, she realizes it couldn't have gone worse. Leading up to the meeting, Erica spent hours trying to understand why employees were underperforming and why the attrition rate was so high. After reviewing dozens of exit surveys, interviewing leaders, and brainstorming with her directors, she concluded that prioritizing learning, development, and mental well-being was key. As she prepared her slide deck, her nervousness grew. While Erica excels at strategic planning, problem-solving, and heart-centered leadership, she struggles to present to the executive team. Her CEO has given her feedback that she needs to communicate her ideas with more confidence and establish an executive presence. The problem, he says, is not her ideas, but her inability to influence the leadership team to buy into them. This was evident during the budget meeting. When it was her turn to speak, Erica nervously stood up, walked over to the computer, and struggled to get her slides up on the big screen. Already rattled, her eyes stayed on the screen throughout the presentation. Her tone was soft and apprehensive, and her delivery was filled with ums and uhs. In the middle of the presentation, the CEO interrupted with questions. While Erica anticipated these questions and she was prepared to answer, she responded clumsily and without conviction. The CEO thanked Erica for her ideas and said while they'll consider them in the future, it won't be a priority in the upcoming quarter. She froze, stood awkwardly for a few seconds with her eyes to the floor, nodded, and sat down. She didn't even get a chance to finish before she was rejected. Erica feels stuck. She struggled with confidence and communication for as long as she can remember. She knows that to make a greater impact and grow her career, she needs to fix this. Today, I'm speaking with Brielle Wohlenhaus, founder of CrossGen Media, a company striving to change the way the world communicates. As a coach and consultant, Brielle helps leaders to become more confident, articulate speakers and helps groups to build more high-performing teams. I'm excited to share Erica's story with Brielle and get her take on how Erica can become a more articulate and confident communicator. My name is Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So, Brielle, I recently read a story about you where you said you turned your fear to your purpose. And it has to do with years ago when you were in high school and you had to do some public speaking. And I would love to hear that story about what happened, that conversation you had with your teacher, and then how it led to you doing the work that you do now.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's pretty funny because years ago I really was petrified of speaking, talking in front of big crowds. I'm like, gosh, I don't think this is ever something I'm going to get over. I always grew up kind of as that risk taker, like being brave sort of person. But when it came to public speaking, that was no go, off limits. So I remember one day I had a presentation, it was in Spanish class. And I had to pull aside my teacher and just say, I can't do this. Like, my anxiety is through the roof. I want to skip class rather than do my presentation. Is there literally any other option? And then here we are years later working and working and working on this skill. And now here I am today where I'm able to talk in front of anybody and meet anybody new and have those public presentations. And so I think that honestly is a big part of my story, turning that fear into literally my greatest passion and purpose.
Yeah. It's fascinating how many people have similar stories where the thing that was their biggest obstacle ended up being what they focused so much of their life on, and then felt a need to share that with the world. I can relate to
Right.
that, and times where I felt stuck and I felt like I didn't have the answers, I was unclear, and now the work that I do is all about helping people to get
Hmm.
unstuck. And another thing I read about you, I started laughing when I read it because I do the same thing. You said that you talk to yourself all the time.
Yeah,
And
all the
and
time.
that yeah, you talk to yourself all the time and that people look at you like you're crazy. And I can relate to that because I've had that
Mhm.
same experience. So when you're talking to yourself, what are some of the things that you say to yourself? And how does that help you?
So I think it depends. Like, say I have a client call coming up or something bigger that we're going to be walking through or talking about, or a, presentation. I am going to be doing a public speaking event. I'll kind of just repetitively practice what I'm going to say or even random things every day. It might not even be that full speech. It might not even be every point that we're going to be talking about on the conversation, but it might just be as short as like 1 minute about talking some little things that I want to say, or even think about, okay, what is the other person going to say? Are they going to respond favorably? Are they going to respond unfavorably? Kind of understanding what somebody else might say from their point of view. I think that's really important to literally like walk through those things in your head, but also vocalize them out loud. Another thing is even singing, like singing, doing different things vocally will actually help you become a better speaker. And so I think that's so fun as well, as you can literally strengthen that skill by doing something fun or doing something you love.
Yeah. There's so much research done on that practice of rehearsing
Right.
before you do and how beneficial that is. And there's two parts to that. There's this part of the mindset that you get yourself in preparing for it, and that eases some of the tension because your mind goes, I've already done this. I've
Yeah.
already gone through it, right? And then the other
Hmm.
part is actually sharpening the skill, which is a big part of it too, and being able to anticipate what someone may say, not because you're trying to control everything and control the
Right.
situation. It's more of you want to be prepared. And
Hmm.
so much of what even you're saying here and what I have learned of you and following your content on LinkedIn and other platforms is you have this passion for developing communication skills. And you've even said that it is the cheat code to success. So, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that developing one's communication skills has that much of a game changing effect on one's ability to succeed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's because I believe it truly is the heartbeat of everything we do. When you think about sales, if you don't know how to effectively communicate, you're not going to excel in sales. Therefore, you're not going to thrive in your business or your career. And sales is a big part of any industry. I would say almost every industry, right? So then there's relationships, same thing, which is kind of cohesive with sales, especially when you're dating. You're selling yourself, you're getting to know each other. Like, do I like this person? Do I not? And if you're not able to effectively communicate with other people, you're not going to have incredible relationships. Same with opportunities. If you're not putting yourself out there or making content, going to networking events, you're not going to get incredible opportunities, or going outside of your comfort zone. And again, like meeting new people, even when it's uncomfortable or you're shy or you're nervous or you're afraid you're going to get rejected. Without that communication skill, you're not going to have all of these maximized things and incredible things. So that's what I realized. Not only interpersonal skills, like those are very important, but communication is the biggest piece of all of that.
Yeah. I once went to this workshop years ago. And the facilitator went around and he asked everybody, "What do you do for a living?" And the person was like, "I'm a customer success manager." And he goes, "Oh, okay, so you're a salesperson." And he goes, "What do you do?" And she's like, I'm an HR. I'm an HR manager." "Oh, so you're a salesperson. And what do you do?" And he
Right.
went around to everybody that way. And I'll never forget it because everybody is a salesperson in one way, shape, or form. There's
Yep.
a stigma behind sales, right? It's like, oh,
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be a salesy person, but that's not what we're saying. We're saying in
Yeah.
every environment that you're in, you are attempting to sell your idea or sell yourself.
For
And
sure.
developing the skill to be able to do that is crucial to one's
Mhm.
success regardless of the position that you're in. And I think in Erica's case, it showcases in her story how it's made her feel stuck. She's had some
Right.
success in her career. She's a VP at this organization, and but she's struggling to communicate her ideas to the executive team when she has to present and be in front of a crowd.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit from your experience, Brielle, of what is happening to someone's mental and emotional state. So Erica's example of where she really gets
Mhm.
nervous and she really struggles. What's happening internally with Erica when she feels stuck and that she's unable to really deliver her message confidently?
Yeah, I believe the biggest thing for Erica and people in general is that fear of being seen. It's the perception of other people thinking negatively of me or judging me or thinking I'm weird, going to say the wrong thing. We really do get on our own heads when we are speaking publicly, or when we're, again, like even dating, meeting somebody new, we automatically assume so many times that, oh, like this is going to go wrong, this is going to go badly, and usually it doesn't. That's the thing. If we start to tell ourselves like I'm going to crush it, this presentation's going to be awesome, that person's going to love me, you'll start to notice that you do start to attract the right people, but things go so much more smoothly. Because it makes sense if you're telling yourself, like, oh my gosh, they're not going to like me. They're not going to like what I have to say during this presentation. What if I have the facts wrong? It's just like the imposter syndrome and the limiting beliefs start to cloud your vision. So in her case, I would say, there's the classic case of practice. She said, practice that presentation ahead of time, gather and leverage her data and metrics and facts, and use that to your advantage. Because the thing about facts, too, especially in a workplace type of presentation, is people can sense that confidence and that conviction from a mile away. But if you're feeling unconfident, unclear, and flimsy about your message or your presentation, in her case, she is probably going to feel like, gosh, I could have done better. If I don't even believe what I say, why would somebody else believe what I'm going to say?
Yeah, it's makes me think of something that oftentimes when I share it with people, it's not the most popular thing, and I want to get your opinion on it because you started to touch on it here. And it's about the fact that when we are really caught in this way, and in Erica's case, we're in a state of self absorption.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is we're thinking about what does everyone think of me,
Yeah.
my own fears. So, in other words, when you're really feeling this kind of way, when you're really stuck like this, you're making it all about you.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you agree with that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. For sure. Like it is already that negativity bias, but in your case, you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be about you. It should be whatever you're doing is to serve other people and add value to other people. And again, when you start thinking that way automatically, I truly believe people will pick up on that and see that, oh, this person is trying really hard to provide something that is great, life changing for me. So the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure you have had this experience as well. And for anyone listening, you can maybe you can relate to this. So I do a lot of public speaking, and I
Hmm.
find that I'm not at my best when I am worried about what other people are thinking or how they're receiving
Right.
the message, or when I'm caught in my own stuff. And I am at my best when I completely forget about me.
Yep.
I'm not thinking about me at all. I am just completely immersed in the experience. And I
Hmm.
am focused intently on everybody in the room and the
Right.
value that they get.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
with Erica, there's clearly that aspect of confidence that you pointed to, right? She doesn't believe in herself or in what she's sharing. And then there are some aspects of just not having certain skill sets that she could develop, because I believe
Mhm.
when it comes to communication, it's a skill anyone can
Yeah.
develop. So from your experience, how much is it a confidence mindset issue? How much is it just missing certain skills that need to be developed? I'm sure it's a bit of mix of both, but just I want to get
Right.
your sense, like how much is it mindset versus actual skill?
Yeah, you're definitely right about a mix of both. And honestly, it does go back to practice. One of the biggest things is doing the things that scare you. So, for example, it would be public speaking, or like right now, say somebody is afraid to go on a podcast or do an interview or something like that. It is doing those things that will not only strengthen your confidence, but those communication skills. So, it could be sometimes like 70-30, it could be 50-50, but it's really just about doing the things that scare you, practice, repetition, and also I'd say investing in yourself. Like, using YouTube, books, you have all these free resources to strengthen your confidence, your communication abilities, any other skill, and also potentially hiring somebody or buying a course, a workshop. All of those things, might cost some money, but it's worth it. Again, if you want to impact every single area of your life, transform your life, a small amount of money is completely worth strengthening that skill, I would say for sure.
There's no greater investment that you can make than in yourself.
For
That
sure.
is the greatest investment of all. So, what in your experience, Brielle, what did you do to get yourself out of your comfort zone? What were some of the things that you found to be the most helpful in getting out of that version of you that was unable to get in front of that Spanish class and present, to being able to communicate confidently, speak in crowds in front of large audiences, as well as be on podcasts? What did you do? Like, what were some of the steps you took?
So the biggest one, and I don't think this is talked about enough, but I actually used humor quite a bit. Like I have no problem with the self-deprecating jokes. So even in certain presentations or something, like I would make fun of myself or use myself as like an ally to make myself laugh and other people, and that would automatically make me feel more confident and comfortable, which was huge. Also pretending like I'm talking to my best friend. I'm not looking at a bunch of random people or acquaintances, on a stage or in a classroom. I just started pretending like I was on my phone talking to my LinkedIn audience, or, same thing on social media. It's like I can't really see you. So getting outside of my own head and just thinking about, again, like the presentation and what I'm providing rather than even myself or other people was huge. And then that other thing was just doing the uncomfortable and difficult things. Like the next year, I did every presentation in high school in person. And over time, say there was like, six over the course of the year, I got better and I got better and I got more comfortable. And then in college, again, it was like so natural to me. I realized like these people, for example, in school, they don't really care. It's a presentation we all got to do. So I'm like, why would they care about, a criminology presentation that we all have to do? And if it was like a speaking event where people do want to see me and they do want to hear about what I'm talking about, that's what I would think about, is they are here for me because they either like care about what I'm talking about, they want to learn more, or they want to meet me, and that is a good thing. So there's nothing bad there that I could present to myself like, oh, these people don't like me, if they are literally here because they like me and they want to learn more about what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's there's so much value to approaching these kind of events or these presentations where you're assuming very positive intent of the audience. So, what is the natural way is, or what I mean by natural is the common primal way of where we are speaking in front of a crowd, to worry about everyone thinks
Mm-hmm.
I'm an idiot, everyone thinks that I don't know what I'm talking about. But you said, I imagine that I'm speaking to an audience of best friends, of people that I'm genuinely connecting
Mhm.
with, people who really do care
Right.
about me. And there's just this different energy that comes out, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that gets felt. It's not even just, it's not the words you're saying, it's how it's being said. And it doesn't require as much of a uh, intentional effort moment by moment when you've set that stage in your mind of, this is an audience of people that I feel I can trust, that like me, and I can then not have to worry about how I'm being
Right.
received, right?
Mhm.
So are there any either books or podcasts or people who have been great influences for you that you would recommend to someone like Erica who feels like she's really struggling? She's very smart, very intelligent person, but this is one area she has to focus on. What would be a resource that you would point her to?
For sure. So, ironically, this is kind of funny, but I really don't listen to podcasts that much. And like when it comes to this skill, ironically, when it comes to podcasts and books and things like that, I really didn't like read on it. I just did the things we were talking about, and that's how. So I think that's kind of funny. So because I was in, school after school after school and reading those textbooks all day, every day, I was like, the last thing I want to do is read at the end of the day. So I feel like at this season in my life, I'm finally starting to get to read like self development books and certain things about skills. But there's this book that I just got a couple weeks ago called Crucial Conversations. I have not read it yet, but I know that's going to be huge for anybody who does want to strengthen that skill. And another one, which has more so to do with the mindset, but I know impacts communication, is Don't Believe Everything You Think. It's literally like 100 pages. It's a super small book, but I truly believe that book will transform your life because it's a big thing with the mindset. And then honestly, just YouTube. YouTube is kind of like the new Google in a sense of type in something like how to improve your public speaking skills, or on LinkedIn or different platforms, like, you know, how can I get help strengthening this skill, right? Those are the best resources, in my opinion.
Yeah. The title of that book is something that I find comes up so often in the work that I do. Don't believe
Yeah.
everything you think. It's fascinating how we are so fueled by the initial thoughts that enter our consciousness, yet
Hmm.
how often those thoughts are wrong. How often
Right.
those thoughts
Right.
don't get it right. Or it's just one angle. It's just one perspective. And how I often term it, I refer to it this way. I say, don't believe your thoughts, lead your thoughts.
Hmm.
Lead
Yeah.
them the way you would lead another person. You wouldn't lead another person with a lot of harshness, and you wouldn't be
Right.
so hard on them. You would lead them with respect and with compassion, and at times firmly if needed, to be able to see things from better perspectives. And I'm with you. That at
Yeah.
its core is what helps with communication more than any tactic. So uh, you mentioned a few things there about practice earlier. You said with Erica, if she were to practice more and get her facts right, that would
Hmm.
help with confidence. What else would be ways you would advise her to overcome things like imposter syndrome, or ways in which she is thinking negatively, her own internal negative self talk? What would be some of the other tools you'd give her to help more in the space of mindset?
Yeah, for sure. So I think two of the most powerful things for anything, but for this would be a mix of prayer and affirmation. I know for me, especially on those days where I don't feel so confident and I don't feel, that conviction about what I'm talking about, that's been huge for me personally. So maybe somebody like Erica can benefit from that as well. Pray before your presentation. I do that, or before a big conversation, a big call with a client, and start to affirm a couple things that are true. I am confident, I have value to provide. I'm bringing something of greatness to the table, like whatever it is that is cohesive with your situation and what you're about to communicate, affirm that. Because especially during those times when we're starting to tell ourselves, like, oh, what if it goes wrong? What if I say the wrong thing? Like, nope, stop, pause for a second and tell yourself 5 truths. And that is so helpful. Another thing that's a little bit besides that is also body language. Practice your body language, your eye contact, are your shoulders back? And this is even when you're meeting new people too. It's body language is a huge thing. How are you walking? How are you speaking? It's all a part of body language. Are you using too little eye contact? Are you using too much? I like to use the 3-second rule. Look at somebody, 1, 2, 3, pause, and then look away for a second and look back, because you also don't want to be creepy either. But there's really a huge difference. For example, if you're on stage or meeting somebody and you're talking like, a hunchback whale, it's not really like alluring. But if your shoulders are back and you just look confident, people pick up on that as well.
Yeah. The the thing you said earlier is very much related to what you were referring to, how a lot of this is in your professional life, of course, impactful, but it also is in your personal life. And you mentioned, for
Mm-hmm.
example, dating,
Yeah.
right? I use that analogy a lot with people.
Yeah.
I
Me
use it a
too.
lot because it's one everyone can relate to. It's like, if you want to be a more influential speaker, you want to be more attractive in the eyes of your employers and the professionals that you work with,
Yep.
consider how we do that in dating, right? So
Yep.
so talk to me a little bit more about how that analogy applies, where you want to take some of the things that work in the dating world and how we
Mm-hmm.
are in our personal lives and bring that into the professional world. Talk to me a little bit about that.
For sure. Well, for example, say a guy is reaching out or asking a girl out, you can just tell right there too, like, is this person confident? Do they have conviction in asking me out? Like, that right there is the same as everything else we're talking about. It makes the difference of getting your dream girl, getting your dream guy, because if you're not, they might not be interested. In fact, they probably won't be. But if you're like, hey, whatever they're gonna say, I don't go around on social media asking people out, but you get what I mean. It's all about that confidence approach and doing it in a manner that isn't overstepping or being inappropriate, but even something like, hey, I saw you doing XYZ. I love that, and kind of going into a conversation in a smooth type of way, again, without being creepy or crossing any boundaries. Even something like that is an excellent way to ask somebody out. We live in the age of social media. I know plenty of people who have met their significant others on dating apps or even in a different state or country. So I would say, again, when you focus on that skill and being confident with whatever you're about to say, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get that dream outcome.
Yeah. Here's the thing too, when you practice this, you don't only practice it when you're in the boardroom or when you're
Yeah,
in those meetings. Bring that into every aspect of life. If what you're
right.
really feeling stuck by is your inability to communicate confidently, then make that your intention in
Yeah,
every interaction. It's fascinating to me that it's the way people compartmentalize things. Why? Your whole life is your whole
right.
life. Whether I'm talking to
Yeah,
you right now or I'm going to be talking to my friend or my fiance or my client,
yeah,
I need to be
exactly.
practicing how to improve my communication skills. And so one thing happens in this story, Brielle, I want to get your take on it. Erica's presenting and then the CEO interrupts in the middle of it. How do you recommend people deal with interruption? How do you handle when someone just interrupts you in the middle of your idea or when you're sharing?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions, and I get asked that a lot. I know I've made, I think, 2 videos now on that. So, a lot of times, I feel like, especially for women, we want to just let them interrupt then. We want to back away and, oh, we don't want to step on any toes or feel like we're going to aggravate anybody. So, we just kind of shut up and walk away. But that's never the answer, no matter who you are. If you are in the middle of a presentation or honestly any conversation and somebody cuts you off knowing you're not done talking, my favorite thing to say respectfully was, hey, I appreciate you pitching in. I'm not quite done with my sentence yet. I would love to hear your thoughts when I am, or something like that. Or I really value what you're about to say, but I would want to finish my sentence before we move on to that next thought. And that way you're asserting yourself confidently, respectfully, And then that other person sees, like, oh, okay, I cut them off. They're not done yet. That wasn't appropriate on my end. And hopefully they do feel a little bit of remorse, like, I shouldn't have done that, or that wasn't appropriate. I won't do that again.
Yeah. I love that approach. It's also coming from a place where you don't assume someone had malicious intent,
Right. Yeah.
because most of the time when people are interrupting, they don't even know that they're doing it. They're not even aware. They're
Hmm.
just reacting from something they
Right.
heard, and when someone brings it to their attention the way you did, in a very kind,
Yeah.
respectful, direct way, it makes them go, "Oh wow, I didn't even realize that."
Yeah.
So, what a great approach to handling when someone interrupts you, how to handle it. You just said something that piqued my interest about the different dynamics, because I tend to look at things objectively. I tend not to paint the world in beautiful colors and say everything is perfect, nor do I do it in a negative way. I look at it
Yeah.
neutrally
Right.
as best I
Yes.
can. And one thing I know for sure, Brielle, is it is different for a woman than a man in the workplace and how they are received in their communication. So, from your perspective, what are some things to account for there? And what, let's say, a female leader has to be considerate of versus a male leader, and how they have to be considerate of. I wasn't intending to ask you that question, but you brought it up, and
Yeah.
I'm curious now. What do you feel are like the important things to consider for a female leader versus a male leader?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like, listen, I feel like being completely honest here, I feel like for the most part, I have no vendetta against like male at all. Like I love men. There's this thing going around in society where it's like all men are bad, all women are bad. And I've talked about this before, like, no, they're not. If you think everyone of the opposite sex is bad, you are the common denominator. And I know that's not what a lot of people want to hear, but if every one of your exes is crazy and dating, or every one of your bosses is terrible, you are the problem. So, that aside, I feel like when it comes to opportunities and everything in life, I've gotten to a place where I am because of me. And so I don't blame anybody. Like, I've never really had a problem with male bosses or anybody. I feel like because I assert myself, because I'm confident with what I bring to the table, I've actually gotten extremely far, and people
Hmm.
very much respect me because of that. So I feel like the bigger thing that we should talk about is accountability. If I hear somebody again that's constantly talking about how everybody else is bad and this is why I'm not succeeding and yada yada yada, that sounds to me like a bunch of excuses. Work harder, think outside the box for how you can start achieving more things. And I know that might sound a little bit harsh, but I don't mess around with the victim mentality with a lot of things. And
Sure.
then on the other side of that, there is the reality that, yeah, there still is that negative connotation sometimes, especially in the workplace with women, or sometimes we aren't respected as much. And honestly, I think the reality there, Jay, is it just depends on that leader. Like sometimes people might be sexist. And guess what? If there's a sexist person, like, I'm not going to work with them. They're not going to be my boss. I'm not going to work for that company in the past before I started my business, or, have somebody in my life who views people that way. You know what I mean? So that would be
Yeah.
my approach.
Yeah. So I appreciate not adopting any victim mindsets. I am. It's unfortunate how often I hear that, and people are not aware
Mhm.
that they're really falling into a victim mindset and they're
Yeah.
blaming the world for everything. And I appreciate taking full responsibility of where you are, and being accountable to
Mhm.
what stage you are in your life or your career. And I do think you have to be very aware of how some people do have bias,
Mhm.
and to be able to look at it without adding layers and layers of story. It's just, this is what it
Yep.
is. I can
Right.
sense it, I can feel it, and then account for it. So if you can account for it, that suggests that there may be some different approaches you need to take in your communication
Right.
there to be able to deal with that personality, or it's not the right environment and it needs to be one that
Mhm.
you exit before it becomes something that's hindering your own growth and
Yep.
your own development. And so there were a few tactical things you alluded to earlier. You were mentioning body language, eye contact, 3-second rule. I like that a lot.
Mhm.
What about tonality? What
Mhm.
are some things you find in being able to communicate your ideas in a way that influences others and being able to have an effective or skillful tonality in your delivery?
Yeah, so tonality is huge over body language or anything else. That accounts for actually much more of the words we are saying rather than the words themselves. So, if I say something super mean in a mean tone, ironically, somebody's still going to perceive it better if I say it in a positive tone. Have you ever had a pet and they get into the garbage or something that they're not supposed to? And then the natural proclivity is like, hey, stop that, or like, get out of there, right? Because you don't want them to get in the garbage or get sick. Well, if you say, get out of there, or if you're like, get out of there, they're going to start wagging their tail, with that positive tone. So that's what I think about. It's the same thing with humans. It's literally all about the delivery and how we say things. If you start yelling at somebody and you're having an uncomfortable or difficult conversation and you're like, I don't appreciate that, rather than like, hey, I didn't appreciate when you do that, somebody is going to think that automatically, okay, the second one I just said is much more attractive and they're going to be much more receptive to what you have to say rather than that negative, sort of harsh and overly assertive tonality.
Yeah. I love the dog analogy because it speaks to how primal it is to respond to body language and tonality
Right.
over the words that you choose. You get think of an animal, right? If you get really big and you put your arms up, the animal's going to react, right? If you
Right.
have that tonality in a certain way, harsh or soft, the animal will react, but the animal won't understand any of your words.
Right.
Now, the maybe the intellectual justification in our communication is, well, we are so advanced that our words are much more important than those other things. But
Mhm.
all the research has proven
Yeah.
that body language and tonality make up the majority
Yeah.
of whether we like or trust someone. There's that Albert Morabian study. It's 93% of all of our communication when it comes to likability or trust has to do with body language or tonality.
Yeah.
So while words are important, it's not to suggest we just completely disregard words. We need to be sure that the body language and tonality are what we really focus on to ensure that
Right.
we communicate in a way where it's received positively. So
Yeah.
with Erica's story, I want to ask you to sum this up for us as best you can. So I want you to imagine this scenario. Erica leaves this disastrous meeting and she walks over to her office and you're there in her office and she's looking to you for guidance. Now I know the kind of person you are, you'll be, of course, very empathetic. You'll listen, you'll understand first before you jump in and give her any advice. But let's assume you've done that. You've acknowledged what she's went through. You've
Mhm.
listened. You've understood. What would be the first thing you would tell her? What would be the first piece of advice that you would give Erica?
Yeah, so I would look at, what did we do and what can we do differently in the kindest way possible with her or with anybody? Where did we go wrong, again, in a loving way, and how can we switch the narrative or change that next time so we have that favorable outcome? That's the simplest thing I would do, and then walk her through the actionable steps on what it would take to bridge that gap from where she was or where she is now to where she wants to be.
Yeah, I love it. A very objective analysis and being able to just look at it. How I often refer to it as with clients, it's as if it were someone else. As if this was happened to somebody else. How
Mhm.
would you analyze this? What worked, what didn't, and then come up with an
Right.
action plan. I
Yeah.
love it, Brielle.
And
And
of
so,
course, that would be different for everybody else. And like, okay, I don't want to spend an hour. Okay, Erica, so this is exactly what she would do and paint the whole picture. But I think you get what I mean. Like the basic, the basics.
yeah, and here's the thing, right? That is something that I believe one can do on their own and be able to get some results. What I know for sure is that when you have another pair of eyes to be able to help you through that, it is a fast forward button that you can push to your own growth or development. So
Right.
if anyone listening is interested in learning more about Brielle and the kind of work she does, I highly encourage going to LinkedIn, following her content, and sending her a DM and just learning a little bit more. Because as we said here in this episode, communication skills are going to be the game changer for anyone. We can't go very far if we are struggling to communicate with confidence. And I know for sure that Brielle is someone who would be able to help anyone listening on how to speak more confidently, and also to help organizations be able to have their teams communicate more effectively as well. So, Brielle, I just want to thank you for taking some time today to chat with me and to share your insights. This was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Jay.
You gotta love Brielle's passion for communication and for tapping into confidence. And I'm going to do my best to synthesize our conversation into the insights and actionable takeaways. For our insights, the first one, do what scares you. She talks about how she herself turned her greatest fear into her greatest passion. So whatever you're afraid of, lean into that and do what scares you. Second insight, if I don't believe what I'm saying, why would anyone else believe it? So you have to be able to have conviction within yourself for what you're saying. That belief needs to be very strong within you in order for you to be able to effectively influence others. Third insight, focus on the audience. Don't make this all about you, whatever the interaction is. You want to display confidence, you want to influence others, make it about them. Pretend like you're speaking to your best friend. That was one of the things she shared. Or even using self-deprecating humor. Make fun of yourself a little bit to get out of your own head. Actionable takeaways. We have 3, of course. First one, practice repetitively. Rehearse the interaction. Not only what you're going to say, but how you're going to say it, as well as what you anticipate the response to be. Vocalize even. Don't just practice in your own head. Practice it out loud. Number 2, actionable takeaway number 2, focus on non-verbals. She referred to having that confident posture in your body language. It's the 3-second rule with eye contact, having more powerful tonality in your voice. Those things will get you a lot farther than only focusing on what you're going to say or what you're saying. The third actionable takeaway is responding skillfully to interruption. If someone interrupts you, don't just allow them to interrupt you, especially when you're presenting an idea. Instead, you could acknowledge them and then assert yourself. It could sound something like, I really appreciate where you're coming from. I really appreciate your idea here. And I'd like to finish my sentence before we move on to that next idea. Would that be okay? If you assert yourself in that way when someone interrupts you, not only is it going to allow for you to continue to share your idea, but also it kind of gives the other person the signal that, hey, that wasn't very respectful, and you're communicating that in a very kind and thoughtful way. Join us in our next episode where we're going to be discussing a few studies. This will be on Friday's episode on how communication affects career success and job satisfaction. We're going to be referencing a study that was reported in the Journal of Management and another one reported in Applied Psychology. And then I'm going to give you one technique, something I typically reserve for my paying clients, but I'm going to share it here on the podcast. It's called the priming effect. And it's based on the research for how you can be your best self and communicate with confidence, especially in sensitive interactions. Until next time, thank you for listening.